Welcome, everybody. I'm Holger Hoke. I'm the Dean of the Graduate College and the Vice Provost for Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies here at the University of Vermont. And it is my distinct honor to host this year's University Scholars Lectures. Today, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural lecture of University Scholar Dr. Christopher Danforth. Provost Schadler, I know the Provost is here, Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs Jane Oketch, distinguished professors, university scholars, colleagues, students, welcome. The University Scholar Awards, presented annually for now 44 years, recognize and honor distinguished UVM faculty members for sustained excellence in research, scholarship, and creative activity. The award is a collaboration between the Provost's Office and the Graduate College. Recipients are nominated by their colleagues and selected by a UVM faculty committee. And today we recognize as a 2024-25 University Scholar in the category Basic and Applied Sciences, Dr. Christopher Danforth. Christopher Danforth is a professor in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics in the College of Engineering and Mathematical Sciences, an internationally recognized expert in, an internationally recognized expert in extensive data analysis and complex systems. He has developed a deep quantitative approach to understanding human behavior using transparent and interpretable machine learning algorithms. He is the co-inventor of the hedonometer, which gathers tweets on X, formerly Twitter, to sample the mood of the world population. With the LEMUS project, lived experience measured using rings, Dr. Danforth measures student success and thriving as a result of behavior such as time spent outside. With an age index of 38, probably risen since I last checked, Dr. Danforth's widely cited research has attracted very large amounts of funding and sustains ongoing collaborations with Gallup and The Economist. As director of the Vermont Advanced Computing Center, he leads high-performance computing into new domains and new spaces at UVM. Chris also helped build the Vermont Complex Systems Center, now, of course, a research institute, with projects that apply robust quantitative algorithms to understanding human behavior. He helped develop the Complex Systems and Data Science graduate program and has been integral to the $20 million EBSCO SOX program for machine learning around large corpora of texts. UVM faculty member since 2006, winner of the Krebs Maurice Teaching Award, exemplary university citizen, university scholar, Professor Christopher Danforth. And it is now my great pleasure to invite Dr. Danforth to deliver his 2025 University Scholar Lecture, Computational Social Science at UVM, the Science of Online Corpora Knowledge and Stories, SOX project, and lived experiences measured using ring study, LEMUS. Dr. Danforth.
Thank you. Thanks, Holger. Thanks, everybody, for coming here. It's so great to see so many familiar faces, and especially nice to be able to do this with Josh and Peter here. We got here together in 2006, and all of the things that Holger was just talking about are the result of all the fun we've had. It's really incredible to look back on that. My goal today is to tell you about what we're doing today and in the future, and show you how we came to these problems, thinking they're important, and how we could contribute to them here at UVM with the special things that we know how to do. So let's see. So we got here, 2006 we arrived, and I had a couple small kids at the time, and had been working on weather prediction, which is one of the great success stories in science, that we had all this data, billions of observations of the atmosphere, and we could feed them into computer models and save people's lives if we could make a better forecast for where a hurricane would go. And it was very clear early on in the internet that we were going to be able to use data that people shared on social media sites and through these wearable devices that we can passively collect, things your phone knows about you, to try and help people make better decisions about their day-to-day activities, their health. And at the time when this all began, though, we didn't see all of that happening just yet. It was, maybe a surprise to know that a mathematician might be a little confused about emotion. That was the main thing. It's like, what are these feelings that people have? And how can I quantify them? That way I will understand them. That's what I was thinking at the time. So I'm going to tell you about that piece of this, how we came to think about emotion and language at the beginning. Talk about the hedonometer a little bit, and then these two big research projects that have a number of people involved in them, and many of them in the room. Super exciting results to show you. So this is the plan for today. I'll probably talk for about 45, 50 minutes, and then we can have time for questions if there are any. So yeah, emotion and language. There's going to be a lot of mascots, because that's part of doing good science is having fun. So back when Peter and I started working on trying to understand what was going on in the world based on the things people shared, the first thing we did was look for examples of text online that reflected our consumption of culture. And music lyrics was one of the easiest things to go and get at the time. And so we made this picture that averaged the sentiment in words that appeared in music lyrics. And one of the first things that we learned after making this picture, almost 20 years ago now, is that people were going to find the results that we show them to be there were two types of people in these audiences. One group would think that the thing we're showing them is completely obvious, and like, why did you even bother? And the other would think that it was totally wrong. And those were the two dominant reactions. And so what we realized we needed to do was to dig into these results and explain. We couldn't just show people things. We needed, at the time, there were a lot of machine learning results that would have some finding, like Twitter mood predicts the stock market, but really wouldn't be able to explain why. So we worked really hard on that sort of thing. And here, in this example, it's showing us that the music lyrics over the course of this period of time, 50, 60 years, they were getting sadder on average. That's what the y-axis is here. And so what we did was we constructed this word cloud for scientists that reflects the change in frequency of words and how they contribute to the overall average. And so the main contributor here is love, and there's just a lot less love after 1980 in music lyrics. Okay, that led us to, why don't we could figure out, it was actually iTunes had a database at the time that we could ping and ask questions about what sorts of genre information there was. It turns out that genres really hadn't changed very much. There was just this proliferation of new genres that people had always wanted to listen to, and they just weren't available up until the time that I was in high school and loving death metal. So it was that this proliferation of new genres was really responsible for why music lyrics had gotten sadder over time. But individual genres were the same over time, according to this sentiment measure that we came up with. So it became kind of a pattern for us. We'd go out and try and find something in the world that we thought was interesting, and then we needed to be able to explain it. And so lyrics were where we started. We thought about collaborating with a couple of guys we met. Jonathan Harris and Sep Kamvar had done this project collecting feelings from blogs. So every time a blog posted a feeling, they would collect that information along with demographics about the people involved in the authoring. So there might be, on their site, you could go and look for lovesick women in their 20s on cloudy days and show what are the feelings that people were expressing at the time. And so I have a couple of these to show you from back then. I feel so much of my dad alive in me, there isn't even room for me. The word feel was the one that this algorithm was looking for on blogs, and it would grab the picture attached to the file as well. This was before people were sharing on social media. I feel like I'm doomed to be only attractive to weirdos. I feel like the jacket needs some detailing and the tights don't really work. And so there's this whole host of fun feelings that we were finding, and there's a lot of flamboyant feelings that get expressed on the internet. And so when you put them all together, this is what we found. These are monthly average feelings in blogs all over the internet. And so those are the gray discs here. And there's some days that deviate, like holidays. It turns out that the election of Barack Obama was the most positive day that we looked at. The word proud was used a lot on that day. Michael Jackson's death was a day that people were feeling sadness back then. And one other thing you'll notice is that over time, this was going up. And again, the sort of thing that people think either is obvious or wrong. And what we ended up learning is that what happened was people who were upset, who had been blogging, were leaving to go to Facebook. So over time, the individuals contributing to the data set were changed. That collection was changing. Our corpus was reflecting a different cohort of people. That's another thing that we learned over time, is we have to understand more and more about who it is that we're looking at. So a couple other fun things from that time. We found exactly the opposite of the famous U-shaped happiness with age curve, where people are If you ask economists, they're going to be happiest at the beginning and end of their life because they have nothing to worry about at the beginning and all the money in the world that they need at the end. So that's the U-shaped curve, a lot of stress in the middle. And we found the exact opposite of that when we looked at the average sentiment of words that people were writing. So middle school is terrible, which you can see on the left in the picture. Yeah, and by the time you're in your 80s and you're writing about how you're feeling, it's not great sometimes. So this was one of the times where we really weren't able to resolve the difference between what people were saying and how they were answering these survey questions. And that's another big theme throughout this is we're looking at individuals and surveying them. That's one way to understand what's going on in their head. Another is to observe them and watch their behavior and how it's changing. One of my favorite results from this time, we were looking at male and female feelings being expressed in blogs. And again, we need to be able to interrogate, like, why is it that we see things? So the average sentiment for men and women in their blogs was about the same, but the up arrows here are all words that women use more often than men. And if you look at the top 15 words, women use the word love, hurt, hate, sad, alone, happy, stupid, guilty, sick, scared. Women use all of those words more often than men. And the only word that men use more often than women is good, which is our universal feeling that we can express how we're going about our day with. So sometimes we would find things that make a lot of sense. And so if you, this particular expression, this matched what people had seen. Sometimes it doesn't. So we scaled up and started collecting tweets. And over the course of almost 16 years, we ended up with over 200 billion messages on Twitter. And when it began, it's one of these how did it start, how is it going situations on Twitter. It was wonderful back in 2010 on Twitter. The average happiness of each day is a different color here, and so you could see Saturdays tended to be really happy, and Tuesdays were sad. Very regular weekly cycle if you took the Fourier transform of this thing. And that lasted for a while. So I'm sliding over here, years are going by, things that you had forgotten about. A shooting at Sandy Hook, a bombing at the Boston Marathon. This was the saddest day that we had seen at the time in the 5 years of data we'd collected. But when you go out now to, many things happened. When the election of Donald Trump happened in 2016, the weekly cycle exploded, and come the pandemic and end of May of 2020, we saw entire weeks that were much sadder than the day of the Boston Marathon bombing. So things changed a lot on Twitter over that time, and we have dozens of papers trying to understand how to describe what was going on in the world and what we could learn through that data. One of them looked at individual GPS tagged messages from different cities, and you could see that cities in the south tended to be more blue. Those are sadder on average, and the red cities were happier. Napa, California ended up at the top of our list. So that was a big deal. Ellen DeGeneres did a segment on it, and Al Roker talked about it, and people in Napa started tweeting all kinds of positive words about this study. And then they got the city of Napa got happier as a result of the outcome. And Beaumont, Texas was the saddest city that we looked at, and this is the cover of the newspaper the next day. Eggheads find Beaumont is the saddest city. And you wouldn't believe the profanity coming on Twitter out of Beaumont about our study. So this is another thing we learned, is that over time when you're thinking about, I started in weather prediction, hurricanes don't change their path because you forecast in the cone really well. But people do. We change how we behave when we know we're being measured. There was a backlash to our study and a number of funny things I don't have time to talk about there. But so we decided to start looking, well, who is it that we're measuring when we look at Twitter? And so here you're looking on the bottom plot at the average sentiment that people post. On the left, it's as a function of how far away they are from home. And it's basically a straight line on a logarithmic axis. So people use sad words at home and happier words the further away they get. It increases logarithmically. And that's also true for people in terms of whether they move around a lot. That's on the right. Like people who have a large radius of gyration, their words are happier. And so one thing we learned there is that there's a lot of people who are out on vacation and tweeting while they're on top of a mountain or drinking in Napa. And that led us to try and understand, well, maybe we can discern differences between how people are behaving where they live versus where they happen to be. So a few other examples. We had, the murder of George Floyd and echoes of other victims of police violence that resulted from the murder of George Floyd. This is individuals who were killed by police, and you could see their names being referenced more frequently following his death. We saw during the Capitol insurrection, that was a particularly sad day on Twitter, and Trump's impeachment trial saw evidence presented that resulted from research that we did and published with the USA Today. So UVM was doing our part to get Donald Trump impeached. We have a website where you can go and get all this data, storywrangling.org, if you're interested in trying to analyze aspects of collective attention. So we made a lot of that available to people. So that's a little bit of the background. We, as part of what we were, these instruments we were building, we wanted to understand how powerful different types of stories were. And we were inspired by a lecture given by Kurt Vonnegut about the idea that the types of stories that we like to listen to or read or watch in movies are kind of retold over and over again, the same types of stories. So here's an example of what a computer might see when you look at Romeo and Juliet. The vertical axis, again, is happiness. And on the x-axis here is just like narrative time through Romeo and Juliet. And how the black curve is an average of a few people reporting how they feel while they read that novel or that play. And then the blue curve is the average sentiment according to one of the instruments that we built. So we did a lot of this type of work to try and understand the relationship between what the instruments show us and what people think. And this is an example of a tragic emotional arc. Things are getting worse over time. And one of our students built a little art project. He plugged some USB sticks into the spines of books. And you could plug them in, and it would plot the emotional arc of the story on the screen while you were doing it. And so Vonnegut had supposed that there would be a few of these arcs told over and over again. And we found in a collection of several thousand books that were made public through the Gutenberg Project that Vonnegut was right. And his famous story that he loved to talk about was Man in a Hole, where somebody gets into trouble and then gets out of trouble again. And so that story is really powerful. And in fact, Peter sketched this out. I love this. This is, we think, one of the reasons why the slogan, Make America Great Again, is so effective, has been used by politicians. Reagan used it and Clinton used it over time. And today is very powerful because it distills the idea of the man in a hole story down into 4 words. And that's really something that we want for our life and the lives of the people we care about. And so anyway, this concept was really inspirational for us when it came time to decide, all right, how are we going to scale up some of our instruments? So I'll tell you now about the Science of Online Corpora Knowledge and Stories project, which involves a lot of the people in the room here. We're trying to figure out how to make scientific instruments out of things like large language models and like the natural language processing techniques that I told you about. And we're also trying to get them in the hands of high school students and high school teachers as examples, because students know about social media. Being able to analyze things at this scale could be really motivating for them to learn about computer science, for example. And there's all kinds of interesting science projects that are coming out of this. I'll tell you just about a couple examples. So we have a whole thread on social science applications, many people involved here today in the room. And one example from Tricia Shrum that was covered by the Washington Post last week involves a project called Dear Tomorrow, where people are invited to write letters to future generations in their family about what they're doing about the climate. And in this experiment, those individuals were asked, they were given some money, they could decide to either keep the money for themselves or donate it to an organization that was doing good work for the climate. And what Tricia Shrum and her team have found is that emotional arc that we talked about, the man in a hole. Things are getting bad for the climate and then they're getting better at the end. Individuals whose letters have that hopeful message at the end and exhibit that emotional arc, those individuals donate more money than the people whose arcs are tragic. So it's an example of an application that came out of this study we did 10 years ago that appears to help people see how they can make a difference now and explain things to their future generations. There's 5 or 6 others that I won't have time to talk about that are funded by the SOX project in the social science vein. We also have a big team working on applications of health for these sorts of tools. And one example Dave Jangraw sent me has to do with a StoryCorps project. Some of you will have heard on NPR or on The Moth. You have people telling stories to each other about something important that happened in their life, maybe their family members. In this project, we're trying to understand what we can learn about individuals' health states from the stories that they tell. So part of the work that Dave does has to do with memory loss, and there's some subset of the individuals who've told these stories who have a memory loss problem. And we're thinking that it might be possible to, through the speech that people exhibit regularly, just like talking with your phone in your pocket, you could eventually figure out how to tell somebody, hey, you should go see a doctor because of the way your verb use is changing or your tone of voice is changing. And you can imagine all of the interesting things your phone could be used to learn about that could help you, not just get you to spend money or attention. So that's an exciting example of a project that the health team is working on. We also have a big education workforce development component to the project, and amazingly, there were only a couple dozen computer science teachers in the state of Vermont up until a few years ago, and we're going to end up doubling that number through this grant and giving high school students the opportunity to see some of the things that I'm showing you today and interact with them. So that's super exciting. We also have a capacity team that involves people who are trying to make it easier to do this sort of research, to get the data, interact with the data in a meaningful way. One example that Ben Cooley, who's here in the audience, is working on involves a partnership that we have now with Wikipedia. You've probably heard that Twitter is kind of a shit show these days. We no longer collect data from Twitter, but we are collecting page views by country and edit activity associated with every Wikipedia page, and have been doing so for a while. So Ben is working on trying to make it possible to algorithmically discover, based on pages that people are visiting and editing activity, what's going on in the world, and surface in real time examples of things that people are upset about, things that people are arguing about in the Wikipedia edits, and then page views, which tell us about what people in each individual country are interested in learning about. So that type of data on collective attention is incredibly new. You know, when Twitter started, it's the first time we could see what, regular people were talking about. Up until then, it was just edited text that comes in newspapers or books, or even music lyrics. A rare collection of people get to contribute to that. So we're really excited about this, and Ben, this is a little demo of what Ben's been working on. We also have this summer a new, very fancy graphics processing unit cluster called IceCore that will be available for the campus to do all kinds of cool machine learning work. It'll have 64 NVIDIA H200, GPUs, and it will do something like 10,000 times the number of calculations that the machine could do when I got here. And it would take up, it will take up something that's like the size of this column, a couple $1 million. Very excited about this. It's going to enable a lot of research. And then I wanted to say thanks to the folks who've been involved in helping administer this grant. As you can imagine, all of the people involved, all of the craziness that's been going on in DC, especially to Chip Cole, who's been a great leader of this project. Okay, so the future of this, we got to figure out how to use language models as colleagues. They're not exactly scientific instruments yet, but we think that some of the tools that we've been working on for the last 20 years will help us be able to do some of the work to see inside how they are functioning. And these new GPUs are going to help us with that. Okay, so that's half. Now I'm going to talk about this Lemurs project, which I think is the first time in my professional life where I've been working on a thing that I actually feel like is helping people near me. And I'm very excited about that. And it's also been an opportunity to take some of the things that I've learned as a parent of kids who are now 19 and 17, the same age of many of the people who are involved in this study, and help the kids near my own age group, given the things that I've learned. So really meaningful project for me. It won't be a surprise for you to hear that mental health rates of mental health challenges have been increasing in kids. This is a figure from Jonathan Haidt's book about diagnostic rates, and you can see anxiety and depression are both going up. They have continued to go up. There's arguments about the impact of screens and social media on these rates that will not be adjudicated with science because we don't do randomized controlled trials with kids. That will continue to be an argument, but what is clear is that people who are spending a lot of time on screens are not spending that time outside or doing the other sorts of socializing that we did as we evolved to be the humans we are today. A lot of the problems that we face, I think, societally and individually are a result of us evolving not to sit and type and not to scroll and consume, but to do other things. And so that piece of this is definitely the most likely candidate in my mind for what's going on. Our instruments have reflected this change in individual mental health states. This plot is of the rank or how popular the phrase mental health is. And it was the 100,000th most commonly used two-word phrase on Twitter back in 2012. And it went up by 2 orders of magnitude. This is a logarithmic plot. Mental health is used 100 times more often 10 years later than it was earlier. So people are talking about this. There's less stigma surrounding conversation about it. That's great. We also were involved during this period in studies to try and infer whether people were exhibiting a change in mental health state. We asked people who'd been diagnosed with depression or PTSD if we could have their Twitter data, their Instagram photos, and compared them to photos posted by people who had not been diagnosed with depression, let's say. And we saw features like the number of faces in pictures posted by people who were depressed. That was smaller. The number of faces was smaller before they were diagnosed. The colors in their pictures that they posted were darker and bluer and grayer before they ended up being diagnosed with depression. So like the example I was talking about that Dave Zhangraw's work looking at memory loss, it's absolutely true that there's signals that your phone can keep track of, whether you're choosing to post it publicly or not, that you might not be aware of, that there are changes happening in your body and in your mind. So that was both very exciting and very frightening, because of course the economy, the surveillance economy, is set up today to monetize the relationship I just described without any individual intending for that to happen. Nobody at YouTube needs to say, I want to advertise to somebody who has this problem next month. The math will do it for them. And so we're really struggling today, I think, societally, with how to manage that situation, that our economy is based on this. And I can promise you here at UVM, we're working on this for 10 years, trying to make sure that we contribute in a positive way to how this economy is functioning by focusing on people's privacy and talking about what sorts of work we're doing and making sure that we're on the right side of this. So that's one example. I personally figured out that what was best for me to feel better was to exercise, like really hard, like until I couldn't talk anymore. And one of my favorite results about exercise, this is so cool. You'll know that when you exercise really hard, it's basically impossible for you to not know that that's happening. And so there have been questions about the placebo effect and its role in the connection between exercise and health. And so one of my favorite examples of this is a study that Aaliyah Crum and Ellen Langer did almost 20 years ago now, where they found people who were getting a lot of exercise but didn't know that they were getting it. People who were service workers cleaning rooms in hotels. And they told half of those individuals about the exercise that they were getting, and then asked them questions and did blood work and measurements to try and decide what impact does their awareness of that exercise have on them. So you can see some examples of the data here. There's an informed group, which is half of them who found out that they were getting all this exercise, and a control group who didn't find out, and all of them were getting the same amount of exercise. That was quantifiably the case. And so the top row is about like what you think about what you're doing, And you could see that once people were told, the informed group were told about all the exercise they were getting, their perceived amount of exercise went up. And not just that, but physiological changes happened in those individuals who were acknowledging, and that they had this mindset happening for them, that they were getting exercise and that's good for them. So this is super fascinating, and I'll come back to this because we see something like this when we ask students to spend time outside. I also, during this period, thanks to lots of mentors, including Peter and Jarlath O'Neill Dunn here in the picture, I figured out that being outside in the winter is okay if you're safe, if you're dressed enough. So I spent my winters riding my bike to work, and my mood got so much better when I started doing this. And that was really surprising to me that that small bit of time could have that impact. And I then, my kids were struggling during COVID. You can imagine having a dad who's an expert on social media at the dinner table, and the kids just want to be on TikTok and Instagram, and what that's like for everyone. You can also imagine what, in February of 2020, the conversation's like when I sit them down and I'm like, look, millions of people are going to die. I'm very sorry. It was rough. So anyway, spending time outside has been really great for my family. And, I think that the impact of nature on kids is the big thing that they're missing as a result of spending a lot of time on their screens. And it was sort of video games when I was growing up that was the thing that people were worried about. Okay, so spending time outside. Yeah, what have our instruments shown us? Well, for one, it's just really stupid to ask questions about nature through Twitter. But that's what we had at the time. We had tweets. So we got all the tweets from parks all over the US. And then we could ask the question, what are the language differences exhibited by people who are spending time in nature? And, at the same time of day, same city, same day of the week, what are people saying? And it turns out that people in nature tweet less negative words. It's not so much that they're talking about how happy they are, but there's less negativity in nature, and it lasts for a little while after they leave, which is very cool. And then in another study that we were involved in, we with 1,000 undergrads in Denmark, discovered that people who were then sent outside to spend time, these college students, they actually needed to spend more than an hour outside before their screen time went down. Their screen time would go up when they went outside for the first half hour or 45 minutes, because it's like, oh, check me out, I'm outside, and they would call. They would use that as a social opportunity, which really was kind of missing the point, right? So we were dancing around this idea, and during COVID, I did one of those terrible things where you're like, I'm going to go outside for a while. I built the treehouse. It got completely out of hand, and but I did get to teach my my class during this period of time out there. But the kids were involved. It was sort of like a dad project that went haywire. But I did get to spend a lot of time outside and realize that it wasn't just the exercise, that there was some aspect of the randomness of it, the sounds and the sights, and that can affect in a positive way what's going on in your brain, your thought processes. And so it was around this time we realized that we would be able to afford to do a randomized controlled trial comparing therapy, exercise, and nature on people's sleep and mood and other measures. So this is Lemurs. This is a massive project that's been going on for over 3 years now. The goal here is really to help people thrive and use technology to support their development, and not in a creepy way. That's important, the non-creepy part. Big group of people. So people who have expertise in physiology and biomedical engineering and data science and data ethics. And it's been really incredible. In particular, I want to shout out to Matt Price, who's in the back over here, who's been really the leader of the study since it began. So it's been very exciting to be involved in. A lot of these students are students who work with Matt. So we have an app that we had the students download. I'll tell you about some of the things we asked them to do and our findings. An app that a company called Yonder built that lets us interact with the students involved in this study. There's another app called Nature Dose that's really cool that measures the quality of the nature around you based on the GPS position of your phone. Noise pollution, how much green, water, things like that. So it's not just time outside, but the quality of the time outside that we can have a ground truth for. We also ask students how much nature they're getting as well. That difference, it tends to be the case that students here get more nature than they realize. And so that's one of the interesting components. We also had, in this study, a curriculum about mental health hygiene called Mood Lifters out of the University of Michigan, and we had students who are randomly assigned to that group. The therapy group would go and learn about, like, why is sleep important, and what is gratitude journaling, and how is yoga helpful, and they would talk about how they were doing. It wasn't exactly one-on-one therapy. One challenge we had, of course, is a lot of students who arrived, they would say they really wanted therapy, and then we'd randomly assign them an exercise class at 6 in the morning and be like, I am out of here. So that was a challenge from the beginning, to do one of these randomized things without losing people who really were signed up for the one thing they thought would help them. And that's a big part of this, is like, we don't know what's going to help us. Maybe some of you who are my age or older, you've figured out some stuff that works for you. I often in rooms will ask, what works for you? And I get one back, divorce was the thing that worked for that guy. But I realized that I really don't like talking about how I'm feeling, but exercise worked for me, and being outside worked for me. But wouldn't it be great if you could figure that out before you go through some crisis? Like what the things are that work for you. What are the right amounts of these things? A personalized story there. Okay. So how are we measuring stuff? This Oura ring is so cool. I am not paid by Oura, but I'm telling you, this is like maybe AirPods and this Oura ring are the coolest technology I've owned in my life. Lots of really cool insights have come to me personally, and then through this study. What does it do? It's got some fancy lasers in it that are measuring the blood flow through your finger, and can infer your heart rate and your temperature. And with your heart rate and temperature, and actually your pulse oximeter, you can measure all kinds of stuff with that data. It's very high resolution, like 1 million observations for me just in the last couple of years, for example. Super cool. So it also can tell you that you're going to be sick soon. There's an example where I slept pretty well, but my temperature, which is the graph that's in red, scary red on the bottom right, is going up. And it's commonly the case that you wake up and you see this and it says you should take a COVID test or whatever, and you do, and it's right. So it saved a lot of people involved in the study. Some of the things we see for students here, this is like when do students go to bed on the left, a little after midnight on average, and on the right, when do they wake up? And you could see kind of the bells for the wake-ups at 7:30 and 8. This is one of those figures people say it's either obvious or wrong, but I feel like obvious is okay in this case. We have a lot of those. This is Michaela Fudalig, who's here, made these pictures looking now at how much activity are people getting as a function of time of day? And you can see that the class schedules are like these, Fourier transform spikes at, 75 minutes and 55 minutes in the day. And so you see Tuesday and Thursday are the red and orange, and they're slightly longer in between those. You can also see that on Saturday and Sunday, people are staying in later, and on Friday and Saturday, people are out later. And this is one of those obvious ones. Okay, we make a lot of pictures that we expect we see what we expect. Okay, we're getting something. Maybe we could trust it if we see something that we didn't expect. That's what we're trying to build here. One of the things that the Oura ring does is tell you about the stage of sleep that you're in. So you tend to have deep sleep right away and REM sleep later, and they each have very important functions. The amount of time students spend in these different states is predictive of their mental health status, along with their heart rate. This picture is probably too far away for you to see, but it's one of the most important figures that we've made, I think. And this is over the course of the first semester. The 3 panels are depression, anxiety, and stress, and these are standardized scores that psychologists asks people a battery of questions that's been validated about how they're doing. And people tend to exhibit less depression over the semester, it looks like, week 1 to 15. But the different colors are how many adverse childhood experiences people have had. They've lost somebody important in their life, or they've had some violent event. And the blue curves represent people who've had 2 or more of those adverse experiences. So again, left to right, it's depression, anxiety, and stress. And on average, the best day of the year for people with 2 or more adverse experiences is still worse than the worst day of the year, worst week of the year for the students who have none. So a lot of the students who come to campus need more support than they're getting. We see that in the data that we're collecting, and we also see ways that we can help them. So I'm going to show you some of those too. Juniper Lovato's here has done some work on privacy associated with this data set, like people are being observed, they're getting this feedback, maybe we're telling them they didn't sleep well, do they really like hearing that from us? We know they don't want us to be their parents. How does their taste for privacy change over the course of the study? So this is from before when we were asking students, like in a pilot phase, what they would like from us. And I'm worried about people being able to potentially, from whatever data you're collecting, like nail me for smoking weed or something, because my heart rate increases when I smoke weed. So if you saw that consistently for however long you'd be doing this, you'd see it and think, this guy's probably smoking weed every night, which I am. We explicitly did not tell them to avoid doing the things that college students normally do. There's no sense in fighting that fight. Sorry, Linda. Here's the reported rate of marijuana use, for example. This was last spring, not this spring, but you can see that on April 20, some of you will know that that's a day that students here on campus enjoy activities. I'm usually one of these people, running at the 425K and taking in the big pile of smoke from center of campus on the way back up the hill. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. It's the people who are reporting this marijuana use, their sleep is actually not terrible. It's just not as good as they think it is, right? They think it's good. Yeah, they think it's helping them, but it's really not that good. As opposed to alcohol, which really does destroy the sleep, not just of people who are our age, but of undergrads too. Apple won't let us export screen time data the way they will the health kit will let you get heart rate data. They surprisingly don't want you to know how much how much screen time their study participants are getting. But Matt figured out how to get screenshots from the students of their screen time report, and they're spending about 40 hours a week on their phone. Full-time job, keeping track of all the things that are happening there. That is not surprising at all to students when they see this. Like, yeah, that's right. That's how much time we spend there. We have a number of examples where we can screen people for mental health status based on things we observe through the Aura data. This plot is probably too small for you to see, but it's the amount of sleep on average that people are getting, and the blue curve represents individuals who have a diagnosis of depression or anxiety, which is about half of the students in the study. And so the amount of sleep that they're getting is on the order of 20 minutes more every night than individuals who do not have that diagnosis. We see the same thing for heart rate. So individuals that don't have a mental health diagnosis, their heart rate on average is a few beats at night, a few beats lower than the individuals who do. We also see that if we want to predict people's reported stress, we ask people how stressed out they are, what's going on for them in their life. The dominant predictor from the Aura data is how many times they breathe the night before. So on average, you breathe maybe 15, 16 times a minute, and last night you breathed 17 or 18 times a minute. This is not a thing you would know, but passively collected, we can see that's an indication you're likely to report being stressed out today. So that's an example of one of the signals we might use to suggest that people go do something that's good for them based on their own physiology. So we have these heart rates overnight, incredibly high dimensional and interesting data. Bless you, Michaela did some work trying to cluster the student heart rate arcs overnight. And on the left, you can see an example of an attempt to find 2 dominant clusters, and on the right, to find 3. And so this is an indication that 2 is the right number of clusters. And the number of nights that a student spent in one of those 2 clusters was a strong predictor of their mental health status. Again, passively collected data that we think could be used as part of an attempt to get students help before they have to raise their hand when they're struggling and ask for it. How about getting them to move? So this is a recent picture from Matt where we asked students to spend a little more time moving around. And you can see in the month before, that's in red, they were getting maybe 7,000 steps. And in the month that we asked them, by sending them some GPT authored and human-in-the-loop read text messages encouraging them to go for a walk, they actually got almost 3,000 steps more for that month. And when we stopped sending them reminders, it didn't really fall off very much. So this is really exciting, the idea that you might be able to incentivize people to move a little bit more. That's a big change that appeared to survive at least for the first 2 months of this semester. And finally, the most important thing that we've discovered, in my opinion, about how to help the students has to do with nature. So I mentioned this Nature Dose app, and this is a picture of what the Nature Dose app thinks of Burlington. So there's a downtown area that's red and has got a lot of concrete, and then the off-campus areas that are more green. Students come to UVM, they like the idea of spending time outside. They spend a lot of time at the ski resorts. We have data suggesting that that's where they get a lot of their off-campus nature. Jay and Stowe and Smuggler's Notch, Bolton. So we also ask them about how much time they think they are spending in nature. And this is what is so exciting, the idea that you could, with all of the things we're doing here, we ask them how well they think they slept. We actually know the answer to that. We ask them how much time they're getting in nature. We know the answer. What's the quality of the nature they think they're getting? We know the answer to that too. And these differences are super interesting when you're trying to understand the impact that each of these things is having on you. I mentioned the exercise and placebo. Physiological benefits that can result from you knowing that you're getting something good for you. And the time that people spend in nature is, this is the theoretical construct associated with it, is it kind of like changes how you're processing what's going on. It's the sort of thing that if you're not tied to your phone, you can kind of get lost. And we all have had experiences like that where we go for a walk and we're like, I don't even know what time it is. How wonderful that is today. So this is one of the exciting results. I'm showing you on the y-axis here is this report of depression, like when they answer questions about from that depression scale. I mentioned that we had this control trial where we randomized people into getting an exercise, that's 3 hours a week of exercise, nature experiences, and then therapy compared to the control group. And the x-axis here is binned into how much nature these individuals think that they're getting. And the individuals who think that they're getting low amounts of nature, most of them do get a lot of nature because they're undergrads at UVM and they're spending time outside. But the people who think they're getting a low amount, they're sort of all the same. And the individuals who are in the nature condition, who were thinking about how much nature they're getting, and actually got a little bit more nature than the people who were not in the nature experiences condition, those individuals, they ended up reporting much lower depression scores if they perceive themselves to be spending a lot of time outside. So that's at the bottom right. So that's what's going on in their self-reported data. And we also have a physiological result associated with this. Here you can see an observational period on the left, and then the treatment period on the right, where we randomize people to do this, spend time outside, exercise, do therapy. And the y-axis here is heart rate variability, which is a measure of how recovered your body is from whatever you did yesterday. You want that number to be going up. It's not good if your heart rate, like if you're very sick, your heart rate will be high and not changing very much while you're asleep. And if you're doing well, your heart rate will go down overnight and it will be quite variable. So your overnight heart rate variability, this is an important indicator of how stressed you are. And what we're seeing here is that this individuals in this nature condition, they didn't sign up for that. They were randomly assigned to that. Their HRV went up over the course of the semester. This is super exciting for a lot of reasons. The big one is that it's cheap to go outside. All right, you don't have to find a therapist. You don't have to wake up at 6 a.m. to go exercise, which not many people want to do. It's available, and it's good. Okay, so I'm just about done here. Some of the findings for lemurs, more than half of the participants met the criteria for generalized anxiety disorder at least once. This was during the first fall semester. Respiratory rate overnight, like how many times do you breathe? That was a dominant predictor of people's answers about how stressed out they were. The heart rate arcs overnight were able to be used to predict individuals' mental health diagnoses. And then this heart rate variability increase for the nature experiences group, super exciting, as is the idea that people who recognize the impact and are thinking about it have a reduction in their symptoms of depression. So, putting it all together, go for a walk with a friend. That's my advice. It's scalable and accessible. We're now trying to figure out how to recruit people from other cohorts that are not UVM undergrads. Maybe people come to UVM because they know this about themselves already, like they like to be outside. So we have efforts to try and fund bigger versions of this. There's a lot more data that we've collected that we haven't talked about today. So if you're interested in doing analysis, we have blood work for the students, we have body composition data. We have them send us like what's going on in their life, texts, very interesting, rich information. They're going to be seniors. They were freshmen when we recruited them, so we're looking forward to that. And then we have a number of efforts now to try and find cohorts that are not here at UVM, including collaborations with Gallup that we're looking to fund, who are happy to help us recruit a representative sample of adults in the US. I also think that it would be important to mention that our goal is not just to like help people feel better, but really make it possible for the healthcare system, which is bankrupting Vermont and our country, to invert a bit. Like rather than wake up in the morning and not feel well and call your doctor, maybe 2 days earlier your doctor saw that you were the person they should call. And if we can figure out how to connect these things in a way that doesn't make it so that like all we can do is spend our money on things that Amazon advertises us, if we can figure that out, we do think we can help with this healthcare system. Your phone has so much information that is not being used to help you. Okay, so thanking all the amazing people who've been a part of this, many of whom are here today. Lots of students on the picture here. These are graduate students and undergrads, and it's been a lot of fun. I think learned definitely that it's best to find people who are from a background different than yours and find questions that they're passionate about. One of the very cool things about building instruments is that you don't have to have a topic that you're excited about. You can let the people come to you who are excited about something and let them do what they love. I want to say a special thanks to Peter. Our work is mysterious and important, and it's been very fun, like the great pleasure of my life professionally. So thank you for having fun every day doing all this stuff. I think that there's a lot of people to thank, but Andi Elledge and the folks at the VACC, Alexa and the other individuals like Ingrid and Geraldine who help us find the resources to do what we love. Yeah, so many people who've been supportive over the years in that regard. A lot of people in this building who've helped clear the lane so that we could do all of this fun science. What a way to live, to just like talk about ideas and figure out how to help people. Incredible. So thank you all, and to my colleagues in the Complex Systems Institute and beyond. Appreciate you. The guys who I've spent so much time moving in the morning at the track with, and yeah, Dom Grasso hired Peter and Josh and I 20 years ago. Took a real chance on me. You guys were solid all along, but appreciate him. And my wife, Kate. And the dogs. That's it. Thank you.